welcome to the Fab and Flashy Show where elegance meets empowerment. I'm your host, Bree Wilson, and if you're a woman who's 35 plus, this is your show because we will discuss so much that you can relate to. Be sure to come back soon because each week we drop a brand new episode. Today's show is part 2 of our Love and Relationship series. On the last episode of our Love and Relationship series, we sat down with a group of 40 plus ladies. They were in different phases. Some of them were widows, some of them were single, never been married, and some were divorced, but they were all dating in midlife. Today is the follow-up to that episode where we will sit down with a Christian dating coach. Her name is Mel. We will discuss faith, dating, and womanhood in midlife. We'll talk about dating with maturity, emotional clarity, purpose-led relationships for women in midlife. Mel, welcome to the show.
Hello, Bree. So great to be here.
Yes. So just briefly tell the audience, what inspired you to become a Christian dating coach?
Yeah, I love this question. So I never set out to be a Christian dating coach. It wasn't my dream growing up by any means, but I think oftentimes God puts us in situations and he lets us use those experiences to help other people. So for me, I started getting into kind of like the dating scene when I was about 26. My cousins had just gotten married from OkCupid dating app. So I was like, maybe I should give this a try. So I have been on dating apps since I was 26. I'm 33 now. Have been in a few different relationships and also started a Christian dating company when I was 29. And so throughout all these experiences, I found that although I haven't found the one yet, I realized my perception and my experience with dating was a lot different than a lot of other people's experience in that I felt like I still had a lot of hope. I still was able to stay on the apps, have endurance, keep going. And I started realizing that a lot of times it was people's mindsets when they were dating and in the dating scene. And I realized I had all these little tips and tricks. And also, I had done a lot of my own inner healing work as well in my late 20s that I just started talking to friends, talking to groups of women, and they started just asking me questions. And few people suggested that I become a dating coach. And so I kind of went for it and have helped a ton of women ever since.
So what challenges would you say, because you're in your 30s now, what
Mm.
challenges would you say do Christian women in midlife face in dating?
I would say definitely the perception, okay, this would be number one, the perception that there just aren't any Christian men left out there. I think any Christian woman listening to this is going to say, yes, that is the truth. There's no more Christian men out there. There's way more Christian women than men in the church. Um, I think that's probably the number one. And then just the hopelessness that comes along with that. Um, yeah, I think those are definitely two of the biggest struggles or hurdles for any women in their midlife right now dating.
I've heard some of the ladies say that something along the lines of, church singles ministry are a joke. They're for really young kids right out of high school.
Right.
There's nothing there but young kids. But, it's just, you have to adjust your approach. And leading up to the next question is, how is dating now different from dating in, let's say, your early 20s?
I'd say the biggest difference is that I think I'm different more than anything. Obviously I'm a little bit older, but I'm a lot more narrow-minded on like what I want. Um, and I think a lot of women can relate to that in that when they were in their early 20s, we didn't really know what we deserved in terms of treatment. We didn't, a lot of us hadn't done the inner work. So, I mean, I know for me, I would just, any guy that would show me attention, I was like, this probably is a good match. Or if I thought he was cute and he
It's
showed me
true.
attention, I was really, I know, attracted to like emotionally unavailable guys. If they weren't giving me attention or the time of day, I was really, and they're really cute, I was really interested. And
Mhm.
now, after doing a lot of inner healing, I realized, wait, those are not the kind of guys that I actually want to be dating. I want a guy who wants me. I want a guy who will pursue me. And I've definitely noticed a difference in the type of men that I'm not just attracting, but entertaining as I've gotten older. So I would say that's the biggest difference. Now, obviously, getting older, um, you sometimes hear the thing of like men only want younger women. Like there is some truth to that, of course, and good for them. But I would say when you're in person, if you're hopeful and you're vibrant, you're going to attract the right person. And if I can even impart anything to women, it's just remembering that like you like don't focus on all the men around you that have changed their preference. They just want the younger women, but just remember, like you're bringing more to the table now too, as you're getting older, and that's something that I encourage women a lot is remembering you've gotten healthier, you've grown into a more godly woman as well.
Yeah, that definitely has to be factored in because, as time goes on, you shouldn't be dating the same way you were, definitely when you were younger.
Hmm.
So, what myths do women tend to believe, after dating after a certain age? Because sometimes we get outside pressure from just not just society in general, but your family. Oh, if you're not married by 30 or if you haven't had kids, it's over for you. Like what myths do a lot of women believe?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, the enemy is is definitely trying to get at our hearts and our minds. And so I'd say one myth is that yeah, it's over after 30 or 35. That's your prime. Um, and that you probably can't have kids after 30 or 35. That's another myth. I mean, people are getting having kids into their 50, 40s, 50s even. That's
Yes.
definitely a huge myth. Another myth is men aren't going to want me if I'm over 30, 35, 40 even. Totally another myth. The amount of stories that I've heard of women who maybe they've never even had a boyfriend until they hit
Yes.
mid 30s or maybe late 30s.
Mhm.
And then they meet their guy. I think there's just and this is even something, as a single 33-year-old that I'm walking through as well. I can know all the truths, but it doesn't mean that the enemy doesn't still lie to you, and he doesn't still know the strongholds that he has over you of the type of myths that you might be tempted to believe. I know one can be like if you're just prettier, if you have that plastic surgery, if you have that the lip filler, the Botox, and and to each their own on what they choose. But
Right.
one thing that I would say we have to remember is that God really is in control of everything. And
Absolutely.
God is more for us than we are for ourselves. God is more for our marriage than we are for our marriages. And we have to do our part, but we cannot believe the myths that we're too old, too washed up, too wrinkly, too um any of that. And that God can't still work a love story for us. Um, there are just too many circumstances, too many stories that I've heard that would
Yes.
prove that wrong.
What advice do you give women who are losing hope, who are just, succumbing to those spirits of, oh, it's over, there's no use? What
Yeah.
advice would you give for them losing hope?
Like I said, this is something that's like really like I have walked through this, and I am still learning too. I think as you get older, it's like I've never been 33 and single before, and then next year I will never be 34 and single before. And so I'm learning that it's not this like you heal one time and then you never have to walk through it again. And so I guess if anybody is thinking like, man, I was okay with it last year, or I've already been through this before, and then it's hitting them again, it's like, well, it's you're learning it again for the first time. Because a lot of us, this is something we hold so close to our heart. It's something we've always wanted, to get married since we were young. And I think the biggest thing that I have learned, even in a more recent, like really going through it, is to press into the Lord. And He's gonna have a word that's different for this woman than it is for that woman, because He knows you. He knows you intimately, and He knows you personally. And only, really, only a word from the Lord is going to give us that comfort. Because at the end of the day, like your heart does desire that husband, your heart does desire those children, and if you're not getting it, it's hard, and it says hope deferred makes the heart sick. And I think a lot of us have really sick hearts, and I'm not and I'm really, I mean, I know I am a dating coach, but again, like I am learning a lot of this again for the first time, walking through it myself. And the biggest thing I can say is press into the Lord because He is close to the brokenhearted, and He binds up our broken heart. And the thing that I feel like I get the most hope from is just remembering like the Lord is doing something in my heart right now. While it seems like it's this thing that's so far out of reach, I just have to keep thinking like there's a reason for this. And so on the spiritual side, press into the Lord. Don't stop doing your secret time with secret place with the Lord every morning. Um, you're going to there's something that's worth talking about, is that the long suffering, the fruit of the spirit of long suffering, that we we have to go through something that we don't get what we want for a really long time before it produces long suffering in us. And um and a lot of times it's things that are really painful. And so spiritually, I would say don't stop pressing into the Lord, and try not to lose your hope. Press into community too. I mean, there's been multiple times, even this past month, I've like been calling my mentors, calling friends, and being like, I need prayer right now. This is really hard. I'm really struggling. And I'm telling you, prayer changes things. So press into that, and get prayer. Um, and then I would say lastly, spiritually at least, don't stop asking. Jesus says so often, like, ask, 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 and it will be given to you. Now, obviously, I'm not promising you ask one time, He's going to give you a husband, but I was at a Bible study a few weeks ago, and this was what they talked about, in, I mean, so many places in scripture, but specifically, um, Jesus talking about asking in His name. And it really inspired me to be like, yeah, I need to be specific in asking and submitting at the same time. But he does say to keep asking. And so if it is something that's been on your heart, don't stop asking. Because I think sometimes that takes just as much faith to continue to show up each day and ask as it does to submit it. So it's like hold submission and asking in each hand. So that's like on the spiritual side. And then on the practical side, I would say try to stay on the apps if you can. Like, I know a lot of us have app fatigue, but I like to think about it kind of like the stock market, where it's like you put your money in, and you just let it sit, and you don't look at it every day. Otherwise, you might get discouraged. But just make a dating app, dating profile, and maybe check it once a day, but put it on like a different device and just check it 15 minutes and then go about your day. It's better to have it on there because you just never know than don't not being on at all. Um, and go to like singles events, go to co-ed events, get out there, at least do something that you enjoy. Because if you're gonna, it's like you can either be a happy, sad, a single girl, or a sad single girl. So you gotta be
Definitely.
a happy single girl and do the things you love, put yourself out there, and really try to lean into the Lord and trust that He really does have a good plan for your life.
So you brought it to the forefront to keep asking, remain diligent, and I think sometimes we lose patience. And again, it could be from outsiders and putting pressure, and sometimes these are just scenarios you put in your own head. You see your friend, your sister,
Mhm.
or everyone else has gotten married except you. And sometimes that can lead you to, okay, let me just grab someone now, which is the
Yeah.
worst thing you could possibly do. So, but at the same time, you know what it is, you know what your heart desires. So, what is the difference between having your standards and being too picky?
All I can think is that the Lord knows our hearts. He knows our desires. I don't know if there is such thing as being too picky. I think that where we need to be careful is not being open at the very beginning. Now, I'm not saying not dating a non-Christian or somebody who, these like he's in jail or whatever. Like, no, you don't need to date those guys. But if they're a good guy, and people are like, you should just give this guy a chance. Going on one date, just being open, I would say that would be where I would just caution you to give it one chance or one date. But past that, if you're not attracted to the person, if you're really not vibing with them, maybe give it another date. But past that, don't, I would say don't put that pressure on yourself. Um, I mean,
Force
I
it.
think that, yeah, don't force it. I want to like give anybody permission, like you don't need to force it. But I think maybe it all comes down to your heart, because one thing I would say is like, okay, does he make a certain amount of money? Something like that. I think the thing to look for instead of does he make a certain amount of money is he a hard worker? What has he been doing with his life the last 10, 15 years? Those I think are better questions to ask and better things to look at versus what is the dollar amount or what is exactly his position. I know a guy that I dated before he's now in a sales, my ex-boyfriend, but he's in a sales role. But before that, it was the intern. He was working at Starbucks because he's a hardworking guy and he just had to get a job. And to me, that shows so much character that he's willing to go low and just get a job. And then, but then he stepped into, a better paying job. Um, I would say that's where we might just ask ourselves, like, what is the why behind this? Because a lot of times, and for a lot of women that I know who are like, I need a guy that makes this much money, it really comes down to a fear that the Lord isn't their provider. And even if they start looking back in their own childhood stories, oftentimes there was either instability with their parents, with finances, they saw that, or they'd been really unstable with finances. And it comes down to their own like woundedness and their own pain around finances. And so I would say if something like that is happening, or you have this one standard that people are like, you're being so picky about that, maybe just bring it before the Lord. Definitely bring it before the Lord and just ask him to reveal if there's any, like David says, like, search my heart, or oh Lord, and reveal any wayward way. Ask the Lord to reveal your heart and be like, is there anything kind of wonky going on behind this? That might be sabotaging you from finding a really awesome man. But past that, if you are doing that, if you're submitting things, I think there are just a lot of women who have an idea of what they want, and I just don't think that that's a bad thing. And I do think that the Lord delights in giving his daughters and his sons good gifts. And so be open, but don't feel bad for having a desire in your heart. That's my stance. It might be an unpopular opinion. I'm also still single, but I do know that the women who have held out for what they want, once they get it, they might wait a little bit longer, but they're very, very happy once they get it.
I do like that in 2025, a lot more men and women are open to therapy, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that could be part of a roadblock that you're unaware of. You may need to resolve something from your past because that trauma could be standing in the way of something or someone that is what you're looking for, but you don't have the capacity because there's something underlying that's unresolved. So I do think that's a good idea to kind of be honest with yourself. We talked about our standards, but how can women set God honoring boundaries?
I would say you have to just get really clear with who you are as a person. Like for me, I'm Mel. I value sexual purity after marriage too, but before marriage, no sex. And what does that mean in my mind? So get really, really clear about what is it that you value. I value finances a certain way. I value tithing. I value, look at all these things that you value and then decide for yourself what's going to be a non-negotiable and what's the type of man, who's the type of man that I want to yoke my life with. And then I think going from there, when you're really clear about who you are, boundaries are really easy because I find that boundaries are hard when you're not sure if you're allowed to want what you want, or let's say sexual boundaries, for example. If you're thinking like maybe I'm being prude or maybe I'm being too strict on this, then if you meet a guy who's like, I don't know if these boundaries are really that important, you're going to be like, yeah, I don't know, maybe you're right. But if you are like, no, I know for a fact that these are good boundaries to have, and a guy's like, I don't know, you're immediately icked out by that guy. And you're immediately like, that's not my guy, because my guy's going to want these boundaries too. So that would be my biggest advice. Just know what you want, know what you will stand for. And anybody who either isn't willing to follow those boundaries or actually is in opposition to them, that's perfect because you realize that's not a good match for you.
What would you say are some common red flags that Christian women tend to overlook?
It's so interesting. So I'm just thinking like red flags when you're in your early 20s, red flags when you're in your late 20s, red flags. Because I mean, I feel like as women get a little bit older, we don't, it still sometimes happens, but I mean, I'll just speak from my personal experience. The biggest one, and the one I see a lot more in the earlier 20s, is a man who just isn't that into you, sticking around for the man that's not that into you. That one has got to be like one of the biggest red flags, is even more so than is he a Christian? Does he love God? Is does he like you? And that one's a hard one. That one hurts because if he doesn't like you, it's realizing like, oh, he's not really that into me. But it's going to save you so much time and heartache, on the apps or whatever. You're asking him nice like questions and he engaging, and you're getting one word answers. That's a man who's not engaged or literally has no conversation skills, and just put it in your mind like, that's weird, he's not talking to me, and move forward. That has to be like, move forward. Um, as we get older, I would say a man that just isn't totally sold out for Jesus. That has to be probably the biggest one because you want kids and you're getting older and you're like, but this guy's such a good guy. I would say do not, do not, do not marry that guy if he doesn't have an intimate relationship with Jesus. Not just that, but if he's not like leading you in spiritually, or at least evenly yoked with you. Those have to be just the biggest red flags that I would say the enemy will come and try to be like, "This is your last chance." Or even
Yeah.
I'd say if it's like close, but not, but it's not God's best. That something that I recently had to walk away from something that it was so good, but I know it wasn't everything that would have made like a godly marriage. I mean, he was very godly, but just there's different components that if you're not getting um, all the components that need to be there, that just trusting the Lord, that like that's not going to make a good marriage, and walking away. But it's hard. But I do think the Lord blesses and honors that.
How can women discern God's peace versus forcing a relationship? Because again, sometimes it's like, oh man, I'm 30, I gotta get married, I want kids, and my parents are
Yeah.
getting old and everyone else is doing it, but here I am still single.
That's like literally what I just went through. And it was so hard because I had this guy that checked so many boxes and was truly amazing. Um, but there was a lack of peace, and there was something in my spirit just said something's missing, or something is just a little just not quite the right fit. And a lot of people are going to be like, come on, like nobody's perfect, nobody's got everything. But I knew in my spirit from the beginning too that there was just something a little bit off, and it would have been a good marriage too if we would have moved forward. But what I knew that I wanted God's peace on it, and I wanted like I didn't want it to just be my flesh also. And so what I did at least was I gave it time. We dated for about 5 months, so I'd say give it time, like, try. If you're not sure, have good boundaries, and get to know that person. But, I mean, I kept the community in it, and then, and I just was really sensitive to what the Lord, like, even with what I was feeling. If something feels off or feels like it's not quite right, like, just pay attention to that. Bring it to the Lord in prayer. I fasted. I asked a lot of people for wise counsel, and ultimately, I ended up feeling peace with ending things. Um, but, I mean, it's hard when there's not these glaring red flags. I think that might be the harder thing for women who are a little bit older, is that you're not usually falling for the same guys you fell for when you were 20. It's for the almost right guys, almost God's best. And
Right.
so, I mean, that's a hard thing to walk away from something that it could give you a husband and kids. But I mean, I'm not quite on the other side of it yet, so I can't tell you it worked for me yet. But I can say I have a lot of peace about it, um, and there's just I've heard too many stories of women, same thing, like it was almost right, it wasn't quite right, but then God did bring their husband. And ultimately, you just don't want to be in disobedience to the Lord. And so, if it's not the right guy, you have to ask yourself, who am I? Who have I pledged my allegiance to? Is it my desires and my idea of what a future looks like, or is it what God has told me my future is going to be? And do I trust him to really to be a good dad and to have my best in mind? And, getting into your 30s, 40s, you'd be like, is single really your best, God, for me? Is that really my best? Your best, Lord? But his ways aren't our ways. And I don't know why this happens sometimes. It seems to, I don't know, but I just know that we just have to trust that when we don't understand it, we can't lean on understanding. And I mean, I think about like Joseph's life. Like he's got to have been asking himself so many times, like, Lord, is this really what you have for me? First, I get betrayed by my brothers, thrown into prison, lied about. Then, he's like takes a few steps up, gets brought back down. But obviously, at the end, he redeems his whole family and um, it like saves Israel basically. And so we just don't know until we get to the end, that we have to really keep an eternal perspective. And that's the thing that gets me through too. When I'm just like, I don't get it, but I'm just going to keep trusting the Lord. Um, and, and then also get involved in things that you love to do. I mean, remember that your life isn't just getting married. Like you have so many, you can get involved in clubs and disciple younger girls and get poured into. And just try to get involved in all these things. I know everybody says like, do the things you can't do if you were single, if you're in a relationship while you're single, and you're like, oh my gosh, I've been doing that forever.
Sometimes fear can hold some of us back. It could be like a lot of times on social media, you'll see something really extreme where like there was this wedding of the year that was supposed to plan, and you get there and the guy leaves her at the altar, or not even anything that extreme. It could have been you really thought that was the one, you sat down and you've been ministered to by your pastor, and then it just doesn't work anymore. And just for whatever reason, you have this heartbreak. What is one piece of advice for women that are scared to date again for whatever reason it is?
I mean, I can totally relate to that and being like, oh, I don't want to feel that pain again, or I don't want to go through that again because it was horrible. And I've just got to think that if it's still a desire on your heart to get married, that you have to think about like the good things that can come from it, not just the bad things. And this is like if you are being wise, if you're not dating like a non-Christian guy or a guy who, you shouldn't be like using this advice to be like, well, then I'm just going to take a chance on him. And who cares if I get my heart broken? Definitely guard your heart, but you have to just know that you're going to be okay. God will take care of you and he will heal you. I think that sometimes in the world and in culture, there's this idea of like that guy who will never get over that girl who broke his heart, or that girl that will never get over. That's just a lie from the enemy that you're never going to get over it. I mean, God made our minds to forget. There's so many things like we don't have perfect memories, praise God, because we forget and we move forward and we move on. And again, there's just been too many stories of people who have healed after having traumatic things happen to them, and they have found joy and they have found life after heartbreak and divorce and God forbid, and God forbid a death of a child, these horrible things that can happen. But if we live our life in fear, we are bound to that fear. We're a slave to that fear. We have to move forward in life and keep going after the desires that God's put on our hearts, and just trust that like you're going to be okay. God is going to take care of you.
How can our viewers connect with you?
So if you want to follow us on Instagram, we host speed dating events in a lot of the major cities around the United States. That's going to be the best way if you follow us on our Instagram. It's iykyk.dating. We're really active on Instagram. And then if you want to go to one of our events, we have a email wait list. That's the best way because the tickets sell out really quickly. And you can get on that wait list by either going to our Instagram and clicking the link in our bio and just getting on that wait list, or going to our website. It's www.iykydating.com.
Ladies who are dating and they're looking for their future husband, please, by all means, continue to be patient and know that this is part of the process. It's not your timing, it's God's. God's timing is not delayed, it's deliberate. Your next chapter is still unfolding. Until next time, be blessed and be empowered.